Hi, everybody. I am Lady Stars of Fire. My real name is Michelle Espinosa, and this is the weekly healing messages for February 26th through March 4th. Before I go into the healing messages, I often have people who will ask me questions, or at least from time to time I do, about some of the stuff behind me, the plaques, or like I said, not the feather, the leaf here. And I know this is new, so I'm taking a moment to tell everybody before I get any questions about it. This is my grandfather's arrowhead collection. Now, I didn't know my grandfather in real life, but it was passed down to me through the family. And I seem to have a better connection now because, well, obviously it's a better connection. I didn't know him in real life, but I happen to have that a lot, where I meet more of my ancestors and my family members once they have passed on. So that is my way of paying respect to my grandfather, as well as collecting and keeping his wonderful arrowheads. With that being said, let's get back on to what this week is about. Again, February 26th through March 4th. This is the end of February. This is where the end of that black moon month finally ends. And the light returns because we're coming into the full moon of March, which is starting off this, well, it's in the middle of this week, but it'll be bringing the light back for the whole month, basically, because you missed a whole month of light with having the dark moon in February, which meant February was going to have a lot of shadow in it. I said that it would be a magical month, just not in a warm, fuzzy way. And it was, because all of that shadow and dark energy has been coming up to force changes to happen, just not in a comfortable way. Now, with that being said, and before I get into it a little bit deeper, Spirit, I always tell everybody that I do the videos because I just really can't not do them. I feel like I've done something wrong, or I'm missing something, like I'm missing an arm if I didn't do it. So I have to do the videos. And I say that I do the videos with the intent of helping anybody who watches the videos move forward in a more positive and healing way. That's what I ask Spirit for. So with that understanding, when I start giving you the spirit guidance that they give me, the astrology or the runes, that's meant to help you, because that's what they're giving me to help you with, because it's exactly what I asked for, to help you move forward in the most positive and healing ways. Now, the reason I said all that is because you might have needed to hear that before I get into this next very little part. They say, it's been said that sin is of the flesh. Because in a form, that's where ego is. Ego is part of our physical world. Ego is part of the third dimensional world. And in first eyesight, the world is the third dimensional world, before you start to evolve and move up into those next dimensions. So in a sense, well, yeah, sin is of the flesh, but it's not just our flesh, the world itself, because of that third dimensional world. I mean, everything that we touch in its own way is its own flesh. I mean, like trees and their bark. Animals are of their own flesh. Everything we deal with is what we've created. It's of the flesh of it. And so that brings us to our earthly pleasures, basically, is where I'm coming from it. Because I'm being told the end of this week itself, as we approach the beginning of March, is kind of like a scab. You know, a scab. Like you've cut your hand and you had a little bit of blood that dried up. A scab. That's healing. And the way Spirit puts it to me is, we are always in need of healing, because we are forever still living. We are forever still evolving. We are ever still changing. We are still communicating with our friends, our family in life, and things change. So as we heal one thing, we've gone and screwed up something else, and we have to heal it. It's a never-ending healing process, kind of like a scab. But the problem is, sin is of the flesh. We can't not seem to stop picking our scabs. Meaning, something could be healing, but we have to go and scratch it off and get right back into it and start all over again. Now, as a scab heals, it eventually gets smaller. But you still opened the hole back up. You still have it bleeding again. You still have a new healing process starting all over again. And eventually it's healed and you have the scar that was there, which was meant to be there in the first place, to help you remember what happened, how you did that, what affected the skin that caused the scar, the damage, to help you learn not to do it again, to help you remember. That's what the scab is all about. And this week is kind of like that, because as we end the dark moon month and the light comes back with the full moon in March, you're ending the whole month of a new moon, a whole month of let me reassess, let me direct myself, let me reevaluate. And you're having no choice because of the dark energies that are coming up, because it's shadow energies. The shadow energies were there coming because we haven't had a dark moon month since 1999. So you're collecting all of the denial and the dark energies and the shadow that's been in denial since 1999, not just of last week. All of these that have been depths that have been inside of you that is creeping up, so that you have to make that healing if you can not pick the scab. But Spirit says they know you're gonna pick the scab, because that's just who we are. It's the third dimensional energy connecting with even our higher dimensional energies. You just can't help it. It's a healing process. And that's what that whole month was about. Now with the new moon coming in, not new moon, with the full moon and the light returning in the middle of the week, I think it's Thursday, when March hits, March 1st was where the full moon will be, is when we finally are able to start to really, truly pamper ourselves and start to do what we have to release, surrender, and let go. Because that's what the full moon is about. So that we can bring the light back and then start the process again properly, without holding on to all those denials and shadow energies that we didn't even know necessarily we've probably been carrying because of ego since 1999. From last week all the way through to 1999 is what I'm getting. All of those things have been shifting and coming up. Nothing that you ever bury stays buried. There's a reason for it. It's not meant to be buried. It's meant to be healed. But sometimes we have to pick at the scab a while before we can actually get it right, so the healing can be made. With all of that being said, now, we were given the 10 this week. And the 10 come to me not just as a number 10. Spirit is actually handing it to me. But the way they're handing it to me, because the 0 looks like a diamond, which also speaks to us of Induus. Which then I realized they were giving me both a number and a rune cast. This is why I'm not doing a rune cast this week. Spirit did it for me. They gave me Induus, which is the magnifier of Isa. Okay? So 10 speaks to us of unity, oneness, wholeness, the discipline that it takes to make that. The 0 is the amplification. It is magnification, and it is multiplication of the 1. And then when we get into the runes themselves, Induus speaks to us of, this is the amplification, the magnification, and multiplication of it. Induus speaks to us of the seed, the seed, the godding, and the gestation. It is the world of our inner experiences, our virtues, our common sense, and our family warmth. It speaks to us of the focus and need to contemplate, to go inward and let something new take form. Stillness, gestation, a moment within the process. Okay, there's your scab again. It speaks to us of the revealing of the need to actually take the time and meditate. It speaks to us of someone who is working with the land or working with their spiritual work. It also reminds us that no decision should be made without proper thought. It is the strengthening of our inner resources, the moment between the different states of being. It is where the inner nourishment is found. Withdrawal to allow inner preparation. Suspension of the outer contact, meaning step back for a little bit. Achieve an internal growth. This is all about, that hidden realm that is within you. And that also reminds me, and we'll come back to it in a minute because it has to do with the next thing that Spirit gave me. And then all of that is magnifying Isa. Isa is ice. It is where the ice is made, where the water is frozen, where the ego stands, is in learning how to let that go and overcome it. It speaks to us of stillness, the power point of concentration, the stasis or blocked energies. It speaks to us of both. You need to have both intense consideration and detachment to work with Isa. You need to be able to detach from it so that you can honestly, emotionally feel it and understand it, then move forward without ego clobbering it into something that it's not. Basically, it speaks to us, Isa speaks to us of the person who has not been growing, who has stopped growing because ego has attached itself, or it speaks to the person who has great mental control. This is about self-mastery. It is the movement in time. It is elevated consciousness. It is consciousness and control over one's own mind. I always tell people, especially with meditation, I'm like, sometimes you have to start off with meditation by teaching yourself to shut up. Because you can't get into meditation if your mind's still thinking and talking crap to you. Sometimes you have to learn to tell your mind to listen to you and not you listen to your mind. And that's what Isa is about. This is about experiencing, again, stillness, retreat, but do not separate. It is reducing one's impact on the immediate environment so that, the self-mastery can be made. It is about learning how to unblock where ego stands in the way. Now, I am also given, and the reason I said wait a second and I'll come back for it is because I'm given white carnations this week. And it speaks to us of the wider universe, the bigger picture, seeing the whole story. It speaks to us of purity of the truth of the whole story. It speaks to us also of de-intensifying the need of the earthly pleasures. Well, that would be the sin of the flesh, where the ego is trying to tell you stuff that you need that you don't really. Stuff that isn't really as important as your ego wants it to be. Okay? I'm also given the number 22 this week, which is a power number. And the reason it's a power number is not because it's 2, but because 2 plus 2 equals 4, which brings us to the creation number. Okay? So it speaks to us of harmony and balance and the need to take a harmonious, balanced stand in all areas of your life, which will equal growth, which will also speak to us of discipline of our ego, looking for our higher self, our soul self, speaking to us of what is right versus what is wrong, not what ego tells us. And that is discipline, which equals growth, which equals soulfulness. Okay? It's about higher perspective. Also, this week, you want to make sure you are not redoing something that you already did and that it did not work. You do not want to redo right now. This is not a redo time. You have redo time coming up soon enough. Mercury will be in retrograde on the 22nd. There you go, 22 again. On the 22nd, Mercury will go into retrograde of March. Yeah, March 22nd. So you've got redo coming up soon. Because Mercury in retrograde is speaking to you about what it is you didn't get or how to properly do it right this time. So if you're going to do a redo, don't be looking into redos until at least Mercury retrograde, period. It's not the time for it. It would be insanity right now to be trying to do redos because it's not going to work out for you. You can't find your inner hero. You can't connect to that holy feeling if you're redoing for ego reasons, basically, is what I'm getting, because I keep being told the holy feeling cannot be found if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, and that's dealing with ego, period. I'm also being given sage, but not sage. I'm being given the smell, and this may be important to you because I'm being given by them. They keep putting sage in my nose, but it's the smell of essential oil, not like burning sage for cleansing. So it may be for whatever reason, but I mean, this is also the time for the full moons coming in. It's also release, surrender, and let go. So it may be a perfect time to use sage in your bath salts and give yourself, the pampering you need. But I am being given sage, and I'm also being given the scent of cinnamon, because here comes the cinnamon again. Cinnamon for me, see, I don't know what that means for you. Cinnamon for me typically is my angels are near. I can smell the cinnamon, and then they'll start giving me different music notes, so I have an idea of what I'm hearing from them. But I usually can tell, depending, not on all angels, but on some of them, when I smell the cinnamon, that they're near, and this is about the spiritualness that's coming from them, the higher ascension. But I'm also being given sage, which really regularly deals with the cleansing. But they're not explaining to me. They're just giving me the sense. Now, as I move forward, let me get into the astrology. Before I go forward into anything else and get into the full moon, excuse me. Sorry, I thought it was going to come off again. Juno entered Pisces. I think it was Sunday. Juno entered Pisces. And the reason I'm telling you that is because Pisces is a loaded house right now. Everything is coming out of Pisces and everything is coming out of Libra, even though you wouldn't know it. Pisces is full, loaded house right now, loaded sign. It's got Neptune in it. It's got the sun in it, Mercury, Venus, Chiron, and everybody's talking to Chiron right now. But all of those energies are in Pisces, and Juno just moved in. Juno is the sacrifice and the commitment it takes to make it work. Period. It is what I consider marriage. Without the proper sacrifice and commitment it takes to make it work, the marriage ain't gonna work. No matter what it is, the marriage is. Now, Juno has jumped into the sign to lend its energy. With that being said, you have a few major things coming up this week. You do have the full moon coming up this week on Thursday, but you have a water trine on the 26th, Monday. This is today. You have moon in Cancer, your universal fourth house, speaking to Chiron, and Venus in Pisces, your universal 12th house, and Jupiter speaking to Scorpio in the universal 8th house, which is magnification, period. Jupiter is an amplifier. Jupiter brings abundance and higher knowledge wherever it goes. And that's speaking to what the relationships own, what they deal with, and what they're responsible for. Speaking to your 12th house of your denials that have to come up so that the healing can be made, so that the new beginnings can start. And this is hitting you just in time for this full moon, because you're also talking about your emotional waters in Cancer because of the moon and the sensitivity of the moon and the depth of the moon, speaking to your Chiron in Pisces, which is your wounded healer, and Venus of your sensitivities, of what it is. Why are you so sensitive about what Chiron is trying to heal? Basically. And that's going to be energies you're going to be feeling today. But in opposition of that, you have Pluto. Moon is in opposition of Pluto, which is your death, decay, and destruction for rebirth, renewal, and regeneration, which means the change, you most likely are going to be fighting it, because you don't want to deal with those sensitivities, but that's how the healing will be made. But this turns into a T-square is what we call, it can become harmonious. It can be something that works for you, but a T-square is put together typically by a lot of negative energies or challenging energies that end up somehow coming together to work positively. So you've got, sitting on top of the trine, the grand trine, is Uranus speaking to Pluto and the moon. So in a strange way, where Pluto's fighting it all and making you deal with the changes you don't want to change, with what you don't want to see of the sensitivities that Chiron and Venus are trying to bring up out of that 12th house that you've been in denial about. You've been wanting to make it sound better than it was. The moon is making you intuitively and emotionally see the depths of the truth of it. Jupiter is magnifying it, but Uranus here is making you learn to stand on your own. Uranus is making you learn to stand on your own, to be the individual that you are, to stand up for yourself, to seek your freedom, and to be able to make that new beginning happen by learning from what did not work. Okay, that was today, Monday, the day I'm making this video. Then you have a trine on the 28th, a fire trine on the 28th, and then you also have a T-square on the 2nd, and on the 4th, you will have another T-square, which I will come back for in a minute. I'm just going to go over the typical positives and the challenges before I hit you with the proper days. The positives this week is Uranus and Aries is trining Vesta and Mars and Sagittarius. Your independence, your individuality, your freedom, your uniqueness, your inventive nature is speaking to your fire, the soul fire of who you are, of the home and the hearth that contains the soul that is you. It is speaking to Mars, which is your passion, your action, your fire. But it is also your inner SWAT team and your warrior, which is in your 9th house right now, which is where your higher self is. It's also ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter always has a way of sticking his nose in everything and making it abundance. That's not a bad thing. But Jupiter just has a way of doing it. Jupiter also rules Sagittarius, which makes this about higher learning, higher perspectives. It makes it about your holiness that is found from within and being connected to it. And being able to connect it with your personal individuality of your freedom, your independence, your uniqueness, your inventive nature. These are positive energies. They're not going to change. They're there all week. Then you also have Ceres and Leo speaking to Vesta and Mars. Ceres is the nourishment that it takes for basically your inner fire and your inner fire, basically your inner fire of your soulful healing self, basically of the home and the hearth that is Vesta, and your inner fire of Mars, which is your, like I said, your passion, your action, your aggression, but also your warrior energy is talking to Ceres about how to properly nourish it, what you need to nourish it, what I cannot go without in order for it to be nourished properly, soulfully. And it is in Leo, which is speaking to us being able to create what it is that we need so that the nourishment can happen. So that, basically the threefold theory can start to work positively for us, not against us. Basically is what this energy is about. It's about training it so that the soul can speak to us about what it is we need as we move forward and be able to create it so that we can have it instead of dealing with ego talking us out of it. It's finding a way to make it happen, not why we can't make it happen. Jupiter is also in Scorpio, which is the universal 8th house, which, like I said, is dealing with relationships and what they own and how to rebirth that into positive ways. Jupiter is higher knowledge, learning, and abundance, period. You've got the 8th house, which is Scorpio. Scorpio is the mystery. End of discussion. Scorpio is the mystery. It is where the reproductive system is. It speaks to us of birth, death, and rebirth, period. This is where that is able to take place. And we're talking about what relationships own in this instance. So that energy is speaking to Chiron. It is speaking to that 12th house of what needs to be healed. What it is that you can't move forward with in your life without making this healing happen. I told you everything's kind of has a way of talking to Chiron this week. It is speaking to Chiron, but it is also speaking to Mercury and Venus, as well as a little bit of Neptune. So it's speaking of taking the magic that Neptune provides in Pisces, with the communication and the sensitivity of how can, lending all of that energy to Chiron so that the healing can be made. How can we recreate it in a positive way without redoing it? Without redoing something that did not work, how can we find the new creativity, the new sensitivity, the new communication so that Jupiter can bring that positive energy in and bring healing into those relationships of what it is they own, what you're dealing with. And when I say what your relationships own, I do mean like your children, child support. It's what do the relationships own? Taxes, bills, the car, your job. What does the relationship have to bring? Communication. All of this is coming into sex, even. All of this is coming into, what does a relationship own? And then how can we bring healing into it? By working through Chiron. But in order to work through Chiron, you've got to listen to Neptune, Mercury, and Venus as it speaks with Jupiter right now. You also have Pluto and Lilith and Saturn. Pluto is change, death, decay, and destruction for rebirth, renewal, and regeneration. It is talking with Lilith, which means you cannot tell me what I will and will not do. I will do as I damn well please, because that's Lilith. And Saturn is your rules, your boundaries, and your walls. Is speaking again with with Pisces, with Chiron, with Mercury, with Venus, with Neptune, with Sun. So how is it that you can build these new walls, these new boundaries, create a new foundation that works for you and is healing from what didn't work in the past? And your 10th house universally. So this is outwardly projection, whether it is of your career or of your goals in your outer community in some way. We are talking about the change coming forth. We are talking about making sure that you stand up for what you want. You will not do what you don't want to do. Being able to build new foundation, new walls, new boundaries that work for you, not against you. But you have to do it by going through Chiron. And in order to go through Chiron, which is the wounded healer, you are going to have to touch base with your inner community. Your inner Mercury, speaking outwardly into the community properly, as well as Venus and the Sun. How do you make this shine for you, honey? Because that's what this is about. How can you learn from the sensitivities of what did not work? How can you learn from learning how to communicate properly what it is you need? And then find a way to make it shine and work for you. These are positive energies that are coming in. Now, your challenging energies are a little bit more difficult because you've heard me say it over and over again. Make or maki is in Libra, which is your universal 7th house. That's where the relationships are. It is the lotus flower, and the lotus flower asks you when it comes up, what level of the lotus flower are you on? The lotus flower is a very highly spiritual vibrational flower, is what is used when we deal with spiritual energies. And it's such a high vibrational flower because it had to work hard for its beauty. Basically, it was born and planted and seeded in the mucky, murky, muddy, nasty mosh, basically. And it grows through the nasty water, like the swampland. It grows through it, and then it comes and finally breaks through the water, and it blooms into this most beautiful thing. But when we're talking about maki, it's talking to you about what level are you on? Where are you on the line of the growth of the lotus flower? Are you still in the nasty water? If you are, why? Period. If you're breaking through, what do you need to continue to break through and become healthy? And once you've broken through, stay healthy. Basically, this is what the lotus flower speaks to us about. And its challenges is it's squaring Capricorn. It is squaring Lilith. Lilith is I'm not going to do what I damn well don't want to do, and you can't make me do it. But maki, or make, however you might want to pronounce it, as the lotus flower says, well, okay, ego, why? And that's where you're in check this week, because the lotus flower is always going to smack you down with the why. because Lilith is ego. She is good for you in the sense of you're not going to make me do what I don't want to do, but she's ego. She's going to force you to try to stand up for yourself, even in egotistical ways. And it's important to decide when is ego taking over versus the soulfulness. And that is going to be a squared conversation this week. It's going to be a challenge. But you also have it in opposition of Uranus, which is your independence, your individuality, your uniqueness, your freedom. So it's also going to be, that lotus flower is going to be fighting you on where is ego standing up and making you feel like you're more important than you are. How is it that you're more important than anybody else? How is it that your freedom is more important than anybody else's? This has to do with being able to do what's right and still get what you need, but in a soulful way, without being egotistical about it and taking from it. You also have Ceres and Leo is going to be chiming in this conversation. Ceres is going to be bringing in, where's nourishment being taken? Because, see, Ceres is not just about giving nourishment, but Ceres speaks to us either of the nourishment that we had, the proper nourishment, and how to do it right, or where it's lacking. So Ceres also could deal with self-denial, self-esteem, health problems, eating problems, it's inner nourishment that is not being met, basically. Like I said, health problems, eating problems, child care problems. All of this, Ceres is going to be pointing out in this energy of where these problems are, because she wants the proper nourishment to be made. But the only way she's going to get it is by pointing out where it's not being made and making it come to the surface and being seen to you. Like I said, all of this energy is coming up for that full moon, so that the energies can start to come into a proper new direction as soon as the month starts. Then you also have Sagittarius is Vesta and Mars, which is your soul fire, truthfully, here, your soul fire, versus your passion, your action, your aggression, and the warrior from within. Speaking of your soulfulness, is going to be having that fight with Mercury and Chiron and Venus also, because you have to have that fight. You have to have that fight out. That inward fight out, because Chiron cannot be healed if that fight does not come out. You have to be able to fight with your ego that's keeping you from making the healing happen, so that it can move forward. Then you have Uranus and Aries, which is your independence, your individuality, your uniqueness, your freedom, is also speaking to both Pluto and Lilith and your outer community and your career area, of what it is those changes are that you don't want to make, but you may have to. Of, like I said, rebirth, renewal, and regeneration cannot be made without the changes. And Lilith may not be wanting to deal with those changes, but